Fasten your seatbelts, clench your buttocks. It's time to get the Innovative Dealer Summit started. This morning we have a cavalcade of CEOs. She really liked that one for some reason. Our first speaker, is Ken Kolodziej. Ken is the CEO and co-founder of String Automotive Solutions. Ken has over a decade of experience in automotive software and is known throughout the industry as a visionary thinker and self-proclaimed data geek. He has led String DPS to its position as the industry's top marketing intelligence platform. With a background in digital marketing that has progressed into business intelligence, Ken is a frequent speaker at industry conferences, sharing his passion for technology and automotive marketing. I know he's been here at the summit at least 2 times that I know of, maybe more. Headquartered outside of Boston, String Automotive has achieved numerous awards and distinctions, including Dealer Marketing Magazine's Technology Leadership Awards, Dealer Elite's Most Interesting and Innovative Companies, as well as being the industry's only Google Analytics certified partner. String's clients span the country, include some of the most innovative and progressive dealer groups. A quick search online turned up the following photos. All right, here we see Ken at the Car Biz Today speaking there. He has fabulous hair. Ken with the headshot there looking pretty good. And then I found this picture. I did not do this. Right? This is Ken. Remember Animal House? Who was the character? D-Day? Yeah, that's Ken. He was the stunt double. Ken told me that he was scared half to death once, and he's really worried that it might happen again. Please give a warm, Innovative Dealer Summit welcome to Ken Kolodziej.
Thank you, Mike.
Welcome, my friend.
It's great. Thank you very much.
Push the big green button.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right. Hello, everybody. Let's see. Green button. All right. There we go. All right. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much for the great intro, Mike. Tim, thanks so much for having me here. Thanks to the CADA and wherever Arnold is as well. Thanks for coordinating all the logistics. I know there's a ton of work that goes into this, and you guys always put on a great show. So thank you so much. Great to be here. So I'm here today to talk about targeted advertising. Hence, of course, the very apropos slide. I feel like, though, in automotive, we often put the cart before the horse when it comes to our advertising. And what I mean by that, if you think about the way we advertise, you can think about really understanding our customers as sort of the framework, like the baseline, right, before we get out there and start sending targeted communications to people. And then, of course, there's the act of the shiny object, right, the act of creating a campaign and sending out a message to prospects. And I feel like we spend an awful lot of time always on focusing on the campaigns, right? Again, that shiny object, whether it's video, whether it's something traditional, it's getting your brand out there, and I totally understand this. You're getting the latest offer, incentives, what have you, but we don't spend enough time really focusing on understanding our customers. And so this is a huge topic, of course, and I've only got 20 minutes, and the clock is ticking, and so I'll try to be sensitive to everybody's time. Got some great additional speakers here. So I was thinking about how to compress everything into a 20-minute time period. And so I actually asked Arnold, what do you think the sort of the best framework would be? And he said, think about this as a 20-minute TED Talk. I said, I think that's a brilliant way of framing it. And about 2 hours later, completely independent of this, one of my managers, Julie Lawton, sent me an email with a link to a TED Talk from 2004 by Malcolm Gladwell. It's all about spaghetti sauce, customer happiness, choice. Maybe some of you guys have seen this, again, from 2004, so it's been around for a while. I think about 6 or 7 million people have seen it. And I watched it. I hadn't seen it before. And I said, this is a perfect vehicle to use to explain why it's so important to focus on understanding your customers before you jump out there and start spinning out campaigns. And so I'll summarize very quickly. I'm not going to obviously go through the whole TED Talk, but I'll summarize very quickly what it's all about. And so it's all about Prego and Prego's battle with Ragu through the 70s and early 80s. And so Campbell's owns Prego, and they had been struggling. They'd always been playing second fiddle to Ragu. And no matter what they did, change the advertising, tweak the formula for the pasta sauce, didn't make any difference, right? They were still number 2, and it was frustrating them to no end. So they hired one of Malcolm Gladwell's friends, Howard Moskowitz, who is basically a food scientist, think of it in that way. And a very smart guy. And so he ended up being approached by Campbell's. They said, look, you got to help us out. And Campbell said, you got to help us make the perfect pasta sauce. And he said, you're looking at this all wrong. There is no perfect pasta sauce. There are only perfect pasta sauces. And so Moskowitz's whole theory was that there is no universal anything, right? There's no universal car. There's no universal pasta sauce. There's no universal suit, et cetera, et cetera. Everything exists on sort of a spectrum. And you have to learn about what your customers' needs and wants are, group them together, segment them, so to speak, and then you can create a product that speaks to them. And advertising that, of course, speaks to that group of customers. And so he went around the country. I think they tested about 50 different experimental pasta sauces, went around the country, thousands of people, tons of different markets, market research, compiled all the data, and he discovered that there were 3 distinct groups of people when it came to pasta sauce. It almost sounds ridiculous, talking about this, talking about spaghetti sauce in front of 100 people or so. But it's a very valuable analogy. So there's people who like the classic sauce, right, which is what Prego had been offering, what Ragu had been offering. There are people who liked a spicier sauce, and there are people who liked a chunky sauce. And really, those were the 3 big buckets that he rolled everybody up into. And so Campbell said, okay, we'll take your advice. And $600 million later, they were very happy, smiling, right? Ragu, they took over the #1 spot, much to Ragu's chagrin, to the point where a few years later, Ragu actually hired Moskowitz to say, you got to help us, do what you did with Prego. So why is this important? It's important because, again, it's critical. It's critical to our businesses to understand our customers at a fundamental level. And again, that is called segmentation. And I found this ad. It's a Xerox ad from 1976. And again, speaking to the one size does not fit all, right? This is human nature. There's no universal for anything. And so it says the reason Xerox makes 22 different copiers, you can see 10 different people wearing the same suit, fits all sorts of different ways. And so this is very, very important to understand. So what is segmentation? I'll give you a quick little primer. We're going to get to in a few minutes, we'll get to an example using some service data from one of our dealer clients. But segmentation is taking your customer base and analyzing them, looking at different attributes that are empirically trackable. It could be simple as age, could be geography, zip codes, it could be demographics, psychographics, could be finances, revenue drivers, so on and so forth. But the important thing is you need to have a consistent look at your customer base, and you need to rank, so to speak, if you will, or pigeonhole, if you will, your customer base with a few different attributes. And so when that happens, you can start to see, in a sea of everybody looking very homogeneous, you can start to see differences appear. And that's fundamentally important, again, to understanding, well, do these people like chunky sauce, spicy sauce, classic sauce, what have you. So you can group them together into different clusters or different segments. And this allows you to cater a very specific message to a given group of people that's very relevant to them without having to go one-to-one. And so this type of technique is what's called a heuristic. It's a way of looking at the world that's good enough. And I have a sort of a tongue-in-cheek, it's kind of I thought it was an amusing cartoon up here from a few years ago. Heuristics can work for us or they can work against us. And so in this particular case, this is an example of the availability bias or availability heuristic, where even though you can see from on an annualized basis, obesity, tobacco, alcohol, these are all sort of the health sins, right? And they kill thousands, hundreds of thousands of people a year. But because the information, news reports about Ebola were more available, this guy is saying, oh, geez, Ebola is going to kill me, right? It's that availability bias. It's working against us. On the flip side, as we all know from vehicle negotiations, right, sales negotiations, there's what's called the anchoring bias or anchoring heuristic. And what I mean by that is that if a price for, say, a used car is set at X, right, say $20,000, for example, even if it's well above what the car should be selling for, that price anchors the negotiation. So the person who's buying the car even when they're negotiating down, even if they're still, they negotiate the price down, if they're still paying too much for that car, as long as it's in relation to the anchor, so to speak, that original $20,000 price point, they'll still feel happy about buying the car. Because again, they've been anchored by that $20,000 price point. So little digression here, but heuristics are very powerful tools for us to work with us or against us. And again, clustering is sort of a heuristic. And so I look at it as a good balance when you look at advertising between broadcast, where it's again that one-size-fits-all message, and that hyper-targeted one-to-one advertising, which is more of almost an Amazon-style, Netflix, really hyper-targeted recommendations, which we will get to eventually, but it takes a lot of infrastructure. And at the tier 3 level, it's very difficult to actually execute on that. So we have to come up with a happy medium. We have to come up with a heuristic, and segmentation is a good heuristic, good way to do that. So let's get back to the segmentation. So we had a few different segments of people. We're taking a hypothetical Honda dealer. This is a pilot. So let's say that we have done our analysis. We have learned that these 3 distinct segments of buyers, they care about 3 very different things when it comes to the pilot. And again, this could be Honda in general. It could be model by model. It could be market by market, so on and so forth. It's very important to analyze the data. So one segment is very financially motivated, right? They want that deal. One segment is very eco-driven, very green, so to speak, right? That's the #1 thing that's most important to them. And one segment, maybe it's all about the features, the packages, the options, so on and so forth. And it's critically important to understand what your customer base likes when you try to message to them or try to negotiate with them. One quick example, we had a customer, it was a BMW dealership in South Florida, and they were advertising. They were trying to get people over to a 7 Series, and their message, they one size fits all, blasted out to everybody, was all about saving $30 a month on their payment. Nobody, I should say very few people, who are in the market or who could be flipped over to a 7 Series care about saving $30 a month. I mean, sure, that on the continuum, sure, that's probably, on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe it's a 2 or a 3 for most people. What they cared about was customer service. They wanted that sort of white glove treatment. And so it's really important for us to recognize these things. So how do we go about actually segmenting our customers? How do we go about analyzing our data? So there's 2 ways to do it. You could do it the Moskowitz way, which is focus groups, which certainly have a benefit to them, right? But they are time-consuming. They can be costly. They can be biased. The participants can be biased, right? Nobody wants to be the one person in the room who's saying no when everybody else is saying yes. Or, of course, we can take a set of data that we already have, in fact, that every single person in this room is sitting on, right? DMS, CRM, GA, Google Analytics that is, other vendor data, so on and so forth. And this is an invaluable treasure trove of data that we are just sitting on. And we don't, there's a lot of talk about this in the industry, which is good, but we do not make even close to good enough use of this data as an industry, as dealers. And I would say as vendors, myself very much included, we do not make good enough use of that data either on behalf of our dealers. We have to do a better job with this because, especially as Mike pointed out, in a flat or down market, this is critically important for us, right? We've got to squeeze out every single ounce of productivity and efficiency out of our operations, out of our data, out of our advertising, right, out of our processes. Very, very important. The gravy train is no longer running at full tilt. So I'll spend a few minutes here and then I'll close out on an example for service data. We as a company often look at sales data, so I wanted to look at something a little bit different. One of our clients, an import dealership in the suburbs outside Boston, not a high volume dealership, so they've got to be really laser focused with their data and how they use it. We've been working with them for a while, and so the DP kindly granted me access to 2 years of their service history to analyze. And quick point here, you don't have to be Campbell's, right? You don't have to be, a high-powered consultant, high-priced consultant like Moskowitz with a, PhD in statistics. I mean, this is me that I think I'm a decently smart person, but I'm certainly no PhD in statistics. I took this export of data, rolled up my sleeves, a little elbow grease, and a couple hours later had some what I think are interesting insights that I'm going to share with you right now. And again, this is something that anybody in this room can do. You're sitting on the data. So I looked at the ROs, and I looked at the on-brand service history. Of course, 90% of their service drive is from their on-brand customers, unsurprisingly. And I said, okay, well, let's take the average customer pay. Let's take the average number of ROs per customer, per unique customer. And let me just look to see if there's an interesting segment of the people who are 3 times the average. And I called them the VIPs because they're there 3 times as often, they spend 3 times as much money, and they're about 25% of the overall service population. So about 1 in 4, right? And then so I said, okay, that's interesting, right? Now let's dig in a little bit deeper. Let's compare that with the overall revenue for the entire service drive, and you see it's almost the 80-20 rule. It's the 77-25 rule, I guess, in this case, where 25% of the customers are generating 77% of the revenue. So, holy geez, this is an interesting cluster, an interesting segment, right? And then, of course, there are, I'm not going to get too deep down the rabbit hole, again, sensitive to time here, but there are a million different ways you could then further analyze and segment this data. But the point here is that we've now identified, with very little effort, frankly, we've identified empirically benchmarks for a very, very key group of people that are driving almost the entirety of the service revenue. These are people who clearly respond well to the dealership, whether it's simply geographic or whether it's really truly customer service driven. They are repeat customers, they spend money, they trust the dealership, so let's treat these people well, right? And this is just another way of looking at the data. You can just see very clearly the flip-flop in colors. Just to put it there with the number of customers relative to the total dollars. Looking at it geographically, you can see that, and looking at it a little bit more in more detail, you can see the VIPs, so to speak, who bought cars from the dealership, pegging the VIN to the sales data, about a 7-mile radius on average for where their home address is. Not too shocking. The VIPs who didn't buy, interestingly enough, it's a much broader radius, a 20-mile radius on average. And so, first thought, of course, that popped into my head, I didn't interview any of these people or what have you, but my first thought was, okay, well, there are people who probably, live farther away but work close to the dealership. So anyway, the whole point here is that we are making an effort to empirically understand our customers better. And in this case, this is real dollars. This isn't just a fun exercise in, let's just analyze data for the sake of analyzing data. That's something that I would do. Free time, that's for me to deal with and you guys to, perhaps laugh at. But this is real dollars. We've identified a real segment of customers who are incredibly valuable to this dealership. You should treat them very well. You should not piss them off, right? This is let's see, from a prescriptive standpoint, okay, well, let's treat the VIPs like VIPs. This dealership does not have any sort of a special service program. Might be an interesting idea to think about rolling one out, work with the service manager and the GM to try to roll out a special VIP service program, make these people feel loved. They clearly have an affinity for this dealership. So again, strengthen that relationship. And that way, when it's time to, especially the people who didn't buy from the dealership, when it's time for them to flip into a new car, instead of the first transaction being that sort of super hyper transactional equity mining, oh hey trigger, okay, let's walk over, let's pull them from the service drive and let's reach out to them and contact them. Instead, it's much more of a relationship that you've built because, again, you're treating them like the VIPs that they are. And that way, they're much more inclined to actually purchase from you. They have that affinity. So how can we apply this? Once we find these segments, once we identify the valuable customers where we know the ROI is there, we know the value is there, how can we then go forward and make hay, so to speak, with these segments? So you can do something called lookalike modeling. So again, once we know what these VIPs look like from an empirical basis, well, the great thing is we can now, everybody's being tracked by many different companies, right? This is, there are many different companies out there that have data on, consumer data on everybody. So we can do lookalike modeling, we can find more of those VIPs through targeted prospect lists, whether it's traditional media or digital. Regardless, we can then find those people out there in the broader market and attract more of the VIPs, right? We now know, or once we dig in, we'll know what they want to, or how they want to be messaged, what they want to hear about. So of course we can make our creative resonate that much better, kind of like the pilot example, right? Don't do the 7 Series example, do the pilot example. And of course then we can get further and further down the rabbit hole and sub-segment et cetera, et cetera. So, so that's pretty much it. I just wanted to, again, reiterate here that, that this is not rocket science. This is a reasonably straightforward attempt or exercise in squeezing a lot more productivity and efficiency out of your existing customer base and then mapping that onto the broader market. And again, in a flat or down market, it is so important for us to be able to be laser focused in the way we approach our customers and the way we approach our marketing and advertising. You do not need to be Campbell's, you do not need to be Howard Moskowitz. You just need a little bit of elbow grease, a good team, and you need to, of course, make sure that, that you're going to actually see, David and Todd, big process people, you need to make sure you have the processes in place to actually take the insights and apply them back into your business. There are real dollars at stake. Maybe not $600 million, but there are real dollars at stake. So thank you very much. That's it. Thank you for allowing me to help you channel your inner Prego. It's been a pleasure, and thank you.
Give it up for Ken. Fantastic. Appreciate it, Ken. I do believe the moniker Data Geek is well deserved. I do love what he had to share. The conversation comes up in stores. It seems like I have a lot of stores remodeling and getting ready to do grand openings. And they always say, who should I invite to the grand opening? And I say, invite your top 20%. Who's the top 20% of your customers, the customers who generate the most revenue for you? And they go, I don't know. Right? So maybe one of your action items could be, I need to figure out who my VIP customers are. Right? I need to determine who the VIPs are. If 25% of my service customers are generating 77% of revenue, might be a good idea to figure out just who those folks are, and there's a lot of opportunities with what could be done with them and for them. Fantastic job. Do appreciate it, Ken.